Former President Donald Trump has said that AI is so scary and dangerous. Could this be a preview of what we might get around AI in a future Trump administration? Welcome back to the AI Breakdown. Well, given that Joe Biden has been president the entire time that generative AI has been in the public eye, we have a fairly decent sense of how the Democrats will think about and will handle artificial intelligence should they win the White House once again. The executive order, which was one of the longest, if not the longest in history, covered many, many different aspects of artificial intelligence. And given that that executive order just hit its 90-day mark, we're starting to see how those policies might be brought to bear. Some of the most recent news, for example, is that the Department of Commerce will be requiring companies to disclose when they are training LLMs. They will also be asking cloud providers to let them know when international customers are using lots of compute, potentially for training LLMs and other advanced AI models. And additionally, if you listened to my episode over the weekend, which was a reading of an essay from Chief Economic Advisor Lael Brainard, you started to get a sense that perhaps from an election standpoint, Democrats were also going to use AI as a way to reignite labor, more specifically the labor discussion as it relates to politics. Basically, the point of that letter, if you haven't listened, was that for AI to work for America, AI has to work for American workers. They called out some specific ideas of what that might mean, but by and large, it was a positioning statement more than a policy statement. Now, it should be noted that when it comes to specific types of legislation, artificial intelligence has not fallen strictly into partisan lines yet. When it comes to the difference between more restrictive comprehensive legislation and less restrictive comprehensive legislation that has been proposed, none of which, by the way, has gotten anywhere, both have Republican and Democrat co-sponsors, meaning that at least for this time, there is bipartisan interest in AI, and where people land on exactly what we should do from a regulatory standpoint is not totally based on one's party. This is refreshingly anomalous in some ways, with Bitcoin or crypto being the only issue that I've seen that up until recently had a similar sort of bipartisan pattern, although that has hardened over the last couple of years. Given all this, I have of course been paying close attention to the early campaigns around the US 2024 presidential election to see when AI was going to become an issue. Thus far, it has largely been theoretical. In other words, a theoretical concern about what might happen if there is widespread misinformation or disinformation campaigns leveraging AI. And only recently, with the Biden AI robocall in New Hampshire, did it become a little bit more real. You'll remember a couple weeks ago during the New Hampshire primary, that state's Democrats got a message from someone that sounded like Joe Biden saying that they shouldn't go out and vote because it wasn't important until November when the actual general election was being held. Now, when it comes to the Republican contender for the presidency, pundits are treating it as all but locked up for Donald Trump. Technically, Nikki Haley is still in the race, but for many, Donald Trump is once again the presumptive nominee. For the first time, at least recently, Donald Trump has spoken about AI and did so in an interview on Fox News. It's a short clip, so rather than summing it up, I'm actually going to just play about a minute of that conversation.
Maybe the most dangerous thing out there of anything, because there's no real solution, the AI, as they call it. It is so scary. I saw somebody ripping me off the other day where they had me making a speech about their product. I said, I never endorsed that product. And I'm telling you, you can't even tell the difference. It looks like I'm actually endorsing it.
That's very scary. I agree.
No, because
That's
you can get
scary.
that into wars and you can get that into other things. Something has to be done about this, and it has to be done fast. And nobody really knows what to do. The technology is so good and it's so powerful that what you say at an interview with you almost doesn't matter anymore. They can change things around and nobody can tell the difference. Even experts can't tell the difference. This is a tremendous problem in terms of security. This is a problem that they better get working on right now.
So a couple things to note about this. One is that deepfakes are definitely making the risks of this technology accessible to politicians. In other words, it helps dramatize the potential issues. It sounded like Trump had seen a deepfake of himself endorsing a product, and that's what got this issue on his mind. A second thing to note is, like him or loathe him, I think Trump is correct when he says that no one really knows exactly how to deal with this issue, that there isn't really a consensus solution. Whoever is going to end up as president next cycle is going to have to deal with that reality. Now, of course, this is a very limited set of information about what he thinks about AI. This doesn't get into the China dimension, which you have to think is a huge issue. It doesn't get into AI in the military, which once again is going to be another key question for any future president. But I think it's fair to say that with these comments, AI has broken onto the national agenda as a potential election issue. Now, certainly in Washington, D.C., the discussion around AI is getting more and more important. Open Secrets, on behalf of CNBC, found that between 2022 and 2023, AI lobbying was up 185%. More than 450 organizations participated last year, including all of the big companies, the ByteDances, the Teslas, the Palantirs, NVIDIAs, OpenAIs of the world. Now, lobbying obviously always gets a dirty look and a scowl from the American public, not without justification. However, a big increase in lobbying does not necessarily mean that the AI industry is all of a sudden disproportionately spending. AI has become a much bigger issue over the period of time that this data was analyzing. I think it's probably to be expected that the companies that have the biggest stake in how this shakes out are going to try to get themselves involved in the regulatory discussion. Like I said, given that there isn't a clear partisan direction for policy, that means there's a lot more openness to different directions that it could go, which only increases the incentive to actually be aggressive about lobbying efforts in the interim. What's more, my guess is that most of these organizations have identified that there may be a window of time where they can influence politicians without there being a lot of additional action happening, given how little momentum there tends to be around big issues like this in an election year. Meanwhile, over in Europe, the EU's AI Act continues to move through the political process. The Information writes, member countries of the European Union on Friday unanimously approved the final text of the AI Act, a wide-ranging framework for regulating applications of artificial intelligence. The vote followed months of debate and lobbying as countries such as France and Germany pushed back against laws they said would stifle their budding AI startup ecosystems. Now from here, EU lawmakers vote on the bill on February 13th, and then in March or April, the European Parliament will vote. Given that we now have complete text, I expect a lot more analysis in the coming days. Now, meanwhile, speaking of the intersection between the private sector and the public sector, white-hot NVIDIA sees one of its new sources of demand as actual nation-states. In an interview last Thursday with Bloomberg Television, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said that countries ranging from India to Japan to France to Canada are talking about the importance of investing in, quote, sovereign AI capabilities. He said, their natural resource data should be refined and produced for their country. The recognition of sovereign AI capabilities is global. Continuing, he said, the vast majority of the computing market has been in the US and to a much smaller degree China. For the very first time, because of generative AI computer technology, it's going to impact literally every single country. So some of the markets will be quite large and global. And this, I think, is what's going to make some of the election happening so interesting, is this tension between, on the one hand, wanting to regulate AI, and on the other hand, wanting to harness it. How countries deal with that and make sense of that tension could be a big determinant of future competitiveness in a variety of ways. However, that is going to do it for today's AI Breakdown. I appreciate you listening or watching as always, and until next time, peace.